I'm Rupert, 74. I lost my wife and my place in the home I built.
December 24th was gray and chilly, but the house smelled of cinnamon and vanilla from the cookies I had baked that morning. My name is Rupert Chandler, 74 years old, and I have lived in this house for more than half a century. I kneaded the dough according to my late Dorothy's recipe, though it was not as good as my wife's. My hands trembled a little when I rolled out the pastry, but I was stubborn to finish. Christmas should be special, even if it was just the three of us. Cole sat in the living room in front of the TV, mindlessly changing channels. My son is 46 years old, and he acts like a teenager forced to spend the weekend with his relatives. Cole's hair has thinned at the top of his head, his stomach sags over his belt, but his character remains the same as it was at 20, lazy and indifferent. After school, his son never learned to finish what he started, and he changed jobs like a glove until he got a job as a storekeeper at a building materials warehouse. There they paid a little, but demanded even less. I remember how as a child Cole could spend hours with a construction set, building entire cities out of cubes, and then destroying them with delight. Dorothy said that the boy had golden hands, that his son would be good. His wife always saw the best in Cole, even when the boy brought from school twos or fought with the neighbor's children. Maybe Dorothy was right then, but life took a different turn. Suri, Dad, what are we having for dinner? Cole shouted from the living room, keeping his eyes on the screen. I'm roasting a turkey, I said, checking the oven. It'll be ready in another hour. Good, good. Just don't make it too dry like last time. I pressed my lips together. The turkey had turned out fine last time, but Cole just liked to be picky. So did Cole's wife. Criticism had become a way of communicating with me, always finding something to pick on. The soup was too salty, the laundry wasn't ironed properly, there was dust on the shelves. It was as if Cole and Fernanda were deliberately looking for something to complain about. On the kitchen table were the ingredients for cranberry sauce, the last thing left to make for dinner. Dorothy knew how to make the sauce special, adding orange zest and a little rum. I tried to replicate my wife's recipe, but the flavor was not the same. Perhaps it wasn't the ingredients, but the mood with which you cooked. The house was silent except for the sounds of the television and the quiet hissing of the oven. 3 years ago, something was always going on here. Dorothy was chatting on the phone with her friends, reading newspaper articles aloud, humming old songs, doing the dishes. Even when we were silent, each other's presence was keenly felt. Now the silence was like absorbent cotton in my ears. After my wife's funeral, I thought loneliness would be the worst. But it turned out that the only thing worse than loneliness was living in the company of people who didn't notice you. Cole and Fernanda ate my food, slept under my roof, used my TV and internet, but acted like I was part of the setting, useful but not worthy of attention. Fernanda appeared in the kitchen around 6, already dressed to go out. A black dress fit her sister-in-law's slim figure, her hair gathered into a tight bun. Fernanda had been a supermarket cashier for 15 years and had learned to keep her face in a permanently disgruntled expression. Customers annoyed her sister-in-law. Work was tiring. Life was not enjoyable. At least that's how Fernanda explained her constant dissatisfaction. Fernanda and Cole had met 4 years ago when her son bought beer after work. Fernanda had been 38 at the time, recently divorced and renting a studio apartment on the outskirts of town. It was hard to call her beautiful, but Fernanda was practical, a woman who could save money and had no illusions about romance. Cole needed such a companion after his failed first marriage. Rupert, we've decided to go to Lindsay's for the Christmas party, Fernanda said, pulling a bottle of white wine out of the refrigerator. You don't mind, do you? I turned around from the stove, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel. It was getting dark outside the window, the street lights casting yellow circles of light on the snow-covered sidewalks. Somewhere, children were playing, laughing, shouting. Normal families were gathering around holiday tables, exchanging gifts, making plans for the new year. What about our dinner? The turkey is almost done. The cookies are baked. We'll eat there. Lindsay's always has a great table. Sure, I thought. Everything is always better at Lindsay's. The food, the house, the company. Fernanda often compared our lives to the lives of people she knew, and somehow the comparison was always not in our favor. Lindsay worked as an administrator in a dental clinic. Her husband was a car salesman. They lived in a new neighborhood. went on vacation to Florida. Then why don't you take me with you? The words came out of my mouth, even though I knew I was asking for it. It would be nice to spend Christmas Eve together. Fernanda exchanged a glance with Cole, who finally pulled himself away from the TV and walked toward the kitchen. There was so much in that look. Annoyance, reluctance, looking for an excuse. His son shrugged as if the decision wasn't his family's to make. Srikanamon, well, I don't know, Dad. There will be young people there. The music is loud. You might not like it. Young people how? Fernanda's 42. Her friends are about the same age. But for Cole, I guess I've turned into an ancient old man who can't stand modern music and fun conversations. I'm not that ancient, I tried to smile. I can listen to music and talk to people. Lindsay doesn't like strangers much, Fernanda added, unscrewing the cork. The wine was expensive, labeled as some kind of French grape. But if you really want it, you can go. True, we'll be home late. My heart beat faster. Did they really agree? 3 years ago, after Dorothy's death, I felt like a ship without an anchor. The kids were grown, separated, then Cole divorced his first wife, married Fernanda, and moved in with my stuff. At first it seemed like a temporary solution, to help my son get back on his feet and to provide myself with company in an empty house. But the temporary dragged on for years. Gradually I realized that I had become a free housekeeper, cooking, cleaning, laundry, paying the bills. Fernanda was working late, Cole was tired all the time, and somehow the housework fell on my shoulders. I didn't mind at first. The house needed tending, and I needed something to occupy my time. But as time went on, it was taken for granted. When my wife was alive, we shared the chores equally. Dorothy cooked and cleaned, I fixed, painted, and worked in the garage. We washed the car together on weekends, went to the supermarket, picked out holiday gifts. It was a team, a family in the full sense of the word. Now I did everything myself, and Cole and Fernanda lived like hotel guests. Akrone, good, then get ready, Cole said, glancing at his watch. We leave in half an hour. I quickly changed into the clean shirt and dark pants Dorothy had bought me last Christmas. The fabric still fit well, though I'd lost a little weight in the last few months. My appetite was gone when eating alone, even if you were cooking for three. Food loses flavor if there's no one to tell you how your day went. No one to complain about the bad weather or share plans for tomorrow. The mirror reflected the face of a 74-year-old man with gray stubble and tired eyes. His wrinkles had deepened and his skin was drier, but his back was straight and his arms didn't shake. 40 years as a locksmith had taught me endurance. Metal does not forgive mistakes. It requires precision and patience. These qualities have come in handy in family life, and especially in recent years. Dorothy always said I was a handsome man, tall, broad-shouldered, with the right features. When I was young, women used to look at me, but I never took advantage of it. I met Dorothy at 19, married at 21, and lived with my wife for 47 happy years. Now the beauty's gone. All that's left is the habit of looking after myself. Rupert, are you ready? Fernanda shouted from the hallway. We're late. I hurried out, pulling on my jacket as I went. It was old but warm, bought when my wife was still alive. Dorothy picked out my clothes with the same care she used to prepare holiday dinners. Everything had to be good quality, comfortable, appropriate for the occasion. Cole had already started the car, the dark blue sedan warming up in the driveway, blowing puffs of steam into the cold air. The car had been bought last year with my money, though it was registered to Cole. I'd been told it was better for insurance. My old car broke down, and it would have cost more to fix it than to buy a new one. Now Cole drove the sedan mostly to work, to the store, to friends' houses. I was rarely taken, usually when I had to go to the hospital or the bank. So, I'll try to make friends, I said to Cole, who was talking again about how I might be bored. After all, new acquaintances never hurt anyone. It was true. In the 3 years since Dorothy's death, my social circle had narrowed to a few neighbors and occasional phone conversations with old colleagues. Leaving the house had become more difficult, not physically, but psychologically. Why go to a coffee shop alone? Why buy a movie ticket for one seat? Loneliness made simple things difficult. Fernanda hummed but finally nodded. That's good, Rupert. Then dress warmly. It's freezing outside and we might stay out late. Cole supported his wife's decision. Yeah, Dad, get ready. We're leaving in half an hour. My heart beat faster with unexpected joy. So I wouldn't be spending Christmas Eve alone over a cold turkey, but with people, with music and conversation. Maybe I could meet someone interesting, hear the news, just feel a part of the living world. Sure, thank you, I said sincerely. I'm looking forward to spending the holiday together. Fernanda sat in the front seat, fixing her makeup in the visor mirror. Her sister-in-law did her makeup skillfully, but without much imagination. Foundation, mascara, lipstick of a neutral shade. At work, bright makeup was not welcomed, and Fernanda's character was practical. She thought it was foolish to spend money on expensive cosmetics. I sat in the back, where the kids used to ride when Cole was little. Back then, we often traveled as a family, to the sea, to the mountains, to relatives in other states. Cole would get cranky on the road, asking to stop, complaining of motion sickness. Dorothy sang songs to her son, played word games, told stories. I drove and listened to the voices of my wife and son, feeling like the happiest man in the world. Where does your Lindsay live? I asked, buckling my seatbelt. On Maple Street, near downtown, Fernanda answered without turning around. It's a nice house, 2 stories. Her husband makes good money. Again with the money. Fernanda was always comparing our income with that of people she knew, and we were always the losers. My pension was enough to live on, but not luxuries. Cole didn't get much, and Fernanda worked part-time. Together we were barely making ends meet, except for the fact that I owned the house and paid the utilities. Cole turned on the radio, and the cabin filled with Christmas tunes. Jingle bells, White Christmas, Silent Night, the songs Dorothy and I listened to every December as we decorated the tree and wrapped presents. Then the house would fill with laughter and bustle, smelling of pine needles and mulled wine. Dorothy baked gingerbread. I put up the lights. Cole helped hang the toys. Now I was the only one who put up the tree. The toys were hung in silence, and under the branches were modest gifts, bought without much joy. Cole had ordered new work boots, which my son had long asked for. Fernand had found a beautiful scarf at a thrift store on sale. Cole and Fernanda didn't seem to be preparing anything for me. At least they didn't try to hide the gifts. The car rolled smoothly through the familiar streets of Presque Isle. The town was preparing for the holiday. Garlands twinkled in the windows of houses, glowing reindeer and snowmen stood on the lawns. Children were sculpting snow babes in yards. Adults were hanging the last of the decorations. The atmosphere was right Christmassy, but somehow it didn't warm the soul. When I was a kid, Christmas seemed like a magical time. My brother and I counted the days until the holiday, looked under the tree for presents, made plans for vacations. My parents tried to make the holiday special, although there was not much money in the family. The father worked at the factory, the mother sat with the children, but somehow they managed to create an atmosphere of wonder. Maybe it was because back then everyone believed in magic. Children, in Santa Claus, adults, in the fact that the next year will bring happiness. Now the holidays have become a formality, an obligation to fulfill. Buying presents, preparing food, saying the right words. Sure. By the way, Dad, Cole said, stopping at a red light, Lindsay's going to have a lot of people over. Her work colleagues, neighbors, her husband's friends. Maybe you'll be bored with them. I could hear the doubt in his son's voice. Maybe Cole was already regretting his agreement to take me with him. Or maybe Fernanda had whispered something to her husband while I was changing. I'll try to blend in, I answered. People are people, and I'm sure we'll find common ground. It wasn't self-confidence. It was just that in 74 years, I had learned to adapt to different situations. At work, I had to communicate with colleagues of all ages, with customers of different social status. Dorothy often praised me for my ability to find an approach to any person. However, in recent years, these skills have not come in handy. The circle of communication narrowed to a few neighbors. Fernanda was muttering something to herself, fixing her hair in the mirror. Apparently, her daughter-in-law was nervous about meeting her friends. She wanted to look dignified, not to slip in the mud. He understood that desire. At her age, women reacted particularly keenly to comparisons with others. Cole drove silently, glancing at the GPS navigator from time to time. His son had never been very talkative, and in recent years he'd become even more withdrawn. Maybe it was the failures in his personal life. His first marriage had broken up. His work was not satisfying, and there were no career prospects. At 46, a man should have already achieved a certain position in the society, but Cole remained in the position from which he started in 20. Maple Street greeted us with Christmas lights. Almost every house was festooned with garlands, and many homeowners had set up lighted figures in their yards. Reindeer, snowmen, Christmas trees. Some especially diligent owners created whole light compositions with musical accompaniment. The street looked like a set for a Hollywood movie about family values. "This is the house." Fernanda pointed to a two-story brick building. Cole parked at the curb between two SUVs. Lindsay's house did look solid. Big windows, a manicured lawn, an expensive car in the driveway. Warm yellow light poured in from the windows, and voices and music came from the windows. The party was in full swing. "Let's go," I said, reaching for the doorknob. "Wait, Dad," Cole stopped me. "Maybe you shouldn't come in right away." I froze, not understanding. "Why not?" Fernanda turned to me. Her face looked tense in the streetlight. "The thing is, Rupert, Lindsay doesn't know about you. We didn't tell her we weren't going alone. But you said we could go." "I can go. But first we need to check with the hostess to see if an extra guest would be a problem." Cole nodded, supporting his wife. "See, Dad, there's a certain kind of company. People may have private conversations, family topics. The presence of a stranger can be disconcerting." "I'm not a stranger," I argued. "I'm Cole's father." "You're a stranger to Lindsay and her friends," Fernanda replied coldly. "They don't know you." I was embarrassed. I was imposing myself where I wasn't wanted. On the other hand, why did they agree to take me with them? Then why did they say it was okay to go? "We don't mind," Cole said conciliatorily. "We just want to do this right. You know what? We'll go in, say hello to the owners, explain the situation. If Lindsay doesn't mind, we'll call you. If she does, well, we'll plan better next time. In the meantime, you stay in the car," Fernanda added. "Just 5 minutes, we won't be long. Literally 5 minutes." I looked at my watch. It was 7:30. It was 10 degrees outside, and it would get cold in the car without the engine running. But there was no other choice. "All right," I agreed. "Just don't take too long." Cole turned off the engine and removed the keys from the ignition. Cole and Fernanda got out of the car, and I was alone. The doors slammed, the center lock clicked. The son had automatically locked the car, forgetting I was inside. Or had he? I couldn't get out now, even if I wanted to stretch or warm up with movement. Fernanda took Cole under her arm and they headed toward the house. Her daughter-in-law walked carefully in her heeled shoes, her son holding her up as she slipped on the icy walkway. The couple looked festive and dressed up, husband and wife going to a Christmas party with good friends, except that the companion had been left in the car, like a dog that shouldn't be taken for a visit. The door of the house opened before Cole and Fernanda could knock. A middle-aged woman in a bright red dress, apparently Lindsay, appeared in the doorway. The hostess shouted happily, hugged Fernanda, and kissed Cole on the cheek. Then all three of them disappeared into the house and the door closed. I looked at the clock. It was 15 to 7. 5 minutes would turn to 10, 10 to 20, and then it wouldn't be long before midnight. The suspicion that had arisen during the conversation was becoming a certainty. I wasn't going to be taken to the party from the start. The consent was bogus, a way to avoid scandal at home. The snow was falling thicker and thicker, sticking to the windshield of the car. The wipers didn't work with the engine off, and visibility was getting progressively worse. Soon I wouldn't be able to see what was going on in the house at all. Maybe it was for the best. Why torture myself watching other people's fun? The temperature in the cabin was dropping slowly but steadily. I buttoned my jacket up to my chin, hid my hands in my pockets. It was about -10 outside, and without heat, the car was quickly turning into a freezer. I wondered if Cole had considered that fact when he'd said 5 minutes. Over the past 3 years, I'd gotten used to being alone during the holidays, but this evening was particularly painful. Not because I was left alone, but because I was first given hope. When Fernanda offered to go with them, my heart beat faster. I thought that maybe my son and daughter-in-law considered me part of the family after all. But no, I was just a temporary inconvenience that needed to be removed in a graceful way. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Dorothy the week before she died. Her wife was in hospital, hooked up to drips and monitors, but her head was working clearly. "Now, Rupert, Promise me you won't be a burden to Cole, Dorothy said, squeezing my hand with weak fingers. What are you saying? I was surprised. What burden? The house is big. There's plenty of room for everyone. Chion, the house is big, but people's patience is limited. Cole is a good boy, but his son has his own life. And so does Fernanda. Don't cling to them if you feel they don't want you. And I won't, I promised, though the words seemed meaningless at the time. Now I realized that my wife was wiser than I was. Dorothy saw through people, could read between the lines. I had always believed in the best, hoped that the ties of blood were stronger than the inconveniences of life. I was wrong. The party went on in the house. From time to time the door opened, letting the guests out on the porch to smoke or get some fresh air. People laughed, hugged, clinked glasses. Someone would set off clappers and confetti would fly all over the snow. The Christmas magic was working for everyone but me. The clock read 7:15. The promised 5 minutes had long since expired, and Cole and Fernanda were still gone. I tried the door from the inside, but the lock wouldn't budge. I'd have to wait for my son and daughter-in-law to return, or knock on the windows for help. The second option seemed humiliating. An elderly couple with a small dog walked by. The woman was wrapped in a warm fur coat, the man in a long coat. The couple strolled slowly down the snowy street, discussing something in calm voices. The dog was jumping merrily in the snowdrifts, leaving tiny footprints. The picture looked peaceful. People who had spent half their lives together and still found something to talk about. Dorothy and I loved winter walks too, especially in the days before Christmas, when the city was decorated with lights and the smell of roasted chestnuts and hot chocolate was in the air. We went shopping, picked out gifts, and stopped at cafes to warm ourselves. Dorothy always found a reason to be happy: a beautiful window, a funny dog, an interesting architectural detail. "Look how beautifully decorated this house," said his wife, pointing to the twinkling garlands. "Do you remember how we wanted to make glowing reindeer last year too?" I remembered, and I remembered how we never made those reindeer because we put it off until later. And then it was too late. Dorothy got sick, and holiday decorations were the last of our worries. 7:30. The snow had covered the car almost entirely, leaving only sections of the windows free. I sat in a white cocoon, isolated from the outside world. My breathing became visible, and my fingers began to feel numb despite the gloves. If Cole and Fernanda didn't return in the next half hour, I'd either have to knock on the house or find another way to get home. Home, where there was a cold turkey and empty rooms waiting for me, where there were presents under the tree that no one would give, where there were 3 plates on the table, even though only one person would be eating dinner. Maybe I should sell the house and move to a smaller apartment, or to a nursing home with recreational programs and medical care. The idea didn't seem appealing, but I wasn't happy with the current situation either. Living with people who don't respect you is worse than being alone. Through the windows of the house, we could see silhouettes of people having fun. Some were dancing to the music, some were standing in groups with glasses in their hands, gesticulating animatedly. The atmosphere seemed warm, friendly, full of life, just the way a Christmas evening should be. I tried to make out the familiar figures of Cole and Fernanda among the shadows, but the snow on the glass made it hard to see clearly. Every now and then, I thought I recognized my son's silhouette, a tall, slightly overweight man in a dark suit. But it could have been other guests. 8 o'clock. It had been an hour and a half since I'd stayed in the car. The cold was almost unbearable. My hands were so numb I could hardly move my fingers. My feet were starting to stiffen too, despite my warm boots. If things didn't change in the next few minutes, I was going to have to make a decision, either knock on the door or try to find a way out of the locked car. But it wasn't the cold that hurt the most. It was the realization of what had happened that hurt my soul the most. I had been deceived by the people closest to me, and deceived easily, without much remorse. They said one thing, did another, and then apparently forgot that somewhere in a cold car there was a 74-year-old man waiting for me. It was worse than just staying home alone. At home I would be warm, with a hot meal, I could watch TV or read a book. Here, however, I felt like an abandoned animal that had been promised food and then forgotten. In another half hour, if no one came, I would try to attract the attention of passers-by, or try to find a way to get out of the car on my own. 74 years old isn't a judgment. I'm still strong enough to fend for myself. I just never thought I'd have to defend myself against my own family. By 9:30, my patience had finally worn thin. I could hardly feel my fingers. My legs were stiff, and my breath turned into thick white clouds of vapor. It was almost as cold in the car as it was outside, and the snow had completely covered the windshield, turning the interior into an ice cave. I tried the door again, pushing on the handle with all my weight. The lock wouldn't budge. Then I tapped my knuckles on the glass, hoping to attract the attention of passers-by, but the street was deserted. All the normal people were sitting at home in the warmth or having fun at holiday parties. The only option left was to knock on Lindsay's house. Humiliating, but better than freezing to death in someone else's car on Christmas night. I started drumming on the window as hard as I could, trying to make as much noise as possible. After a few minutes of my efforts, the door of the house opened. An unfamiliar, middle-aged man appeared on the porch, holding a wine glass in his hand. He squinted his eyes at the snow-covered car, then said something over his shoulder to the people in the house. Soon, Cole and Fernanda appeared beside him. His son looked slightly groggy, cheeks ruddy from the heat and alcohol. Fernanda held onto his arm, rocking back on her heels. Both looked relaxed and cheerful, people having a great time in good company. Cole walked to the car and opened the door. Frosty air rushed into the cabin, but after an hour and a half in icy confinement, even it seemed relatively warm. "Dad, what are you doing?" my son asked in surprise, as if he didn't understand why I'd been sitting in a locked car for more than 2 hours. "Waiting for you like you asked," I answered, struggling to get out. My legs were buckling from sitting in the uncomfortable position for so long. "We said 5 minutes," Fernanda said, coming closer. "Why did you have to wait so long?" Her tone was perplexed, almost accusatory, as if it were my fault for sitting in a cold car for 2.5 hours. "You locked me in the car," I reminded her. "I couldn't get out." Cole slapped his forehead. "Exactly, the central locking system. I forgot." "I don't know. We thought you'd changed your mind and decided to wait in the warmth," Fernanda added. "We didn't think to check." Didn't think to check. In 2.5 hours, they didn't think to go out and see how an elderly man was doing who had been left in an unheated car in winter. Amazing thoughtfulness. "Oi, well, did you invite me?" I asked, trying not to shiver from the cold. Cole and Fernanda looked at each other. There was something awkward, guilty in that look. "Actually, Dad, Lindsay said there's really not much room," Cole began. "And the company's already formed," Fernanda chimed in. "When adding a new person in the middle of the evening is awkward. But we had a great time," the son continued. "We met some interesting people and had some amazing food. Lindsay cooks like a chef. They sounded like they'd only been at the party for a few minutes, not 2.5 hours. And they sounded like I should have been happy for their successful pastime, forgetting about my own misery." "So you've been having fun inside all this time, knowing I was sitting here in the cold?" "We didn't know you were in the cold," Fernanda objected. "We thought you'd gone home or gone to some cafe to warm up." "How could I leave if you locked me in the car?" "Well, we didn't do it on purpose," Cole said conciliatory. "I just automatically pushed the button." Habit, habit. Locking his father in the car in the winter had become a habit. The man who'd left the house first was still standing on the porch, watching our family scene. He was joined by a woman in a red dress, obviously Lindsay. Both looked intrigued by what was happening. "Is everything all right?" "Owie," Lindsay shouted. "Yes, everything's fine," Cole waved at her. "Just a little misunderstanding with Dad." A little misunderstanding. 2.5 hours in an icy car is a little misunderstanding. "Look, Dad," Cole said in a quieter voice. "Why don't you not make a scene? People are watching." "What scene?" I wondered. "I just want to understand what's going on." "Cherie, what's going on is that you're over-dramatizing it," Fernanda interjected. "So what if I sat in the car? But it's fresh air, it's good for your health." "Healthy?" I repeated, not believing what I heard. Of course," nodded my daughter-in-law. "It is good for old people to harden themselves, strengthens the immune system, prolongs life." Cole grinned, supporting his wife. "Yeah, Dad, think of it as cryotherapy. They pay a lot of money for that kind of treatment at spas." They were laughing, standing in front of me, drunk and happy, laughing at the fact that I'd been freezing in the car for 2.5 hours. They laughed at my suffering, at my humiliation. "It's good for an old man to toughen up," Fernanda repeated and laughed even louder. Something broke in me at that moment. The last threads of patience, the last vestiges of family affection. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, who were giggling like children playing a silly joke, and realized that I couldn't stand it any longer. I see, I said calmly. Then I'll go home. Audrey, what do you mean home? Cole was surprised. We're in a car. I'll walk. Walk? Fernanda stopped laughing. Rupert, don't be silly. It's over an hour from home. It's okay. It's good for your health, I said, using her own words. Walking is good for old people. I turned and walked down the snowy street away from Lindsay's house, away from the laughing voices, away from the people who had once been my family. Behind me, I could hear the cheers. Dash, dash, Dad, come back. Don't be stupid. Rupert, don't make a spectacle of yourself. But I didn't turn around. I just walked forward on the slippery sidewalk, feeling my breath getting easier with each step. Not from the cold, but from relief. The snow crunched under my feet. The wind tingled my cheeks, but I didn't feel any discomfort. On the contrary, after 2.5 hours of confinement, movement felt like bliss. My blood began to circulate normally. My muscles warmed up. My thoughts cleared. Maple Street was quiet and deserted. Most of the houses had their windows lit up. People gathered around holiday tables, exchanging gifts, making plans for the new year. Normal families were doing what you're supposed to do on Christmas Day, and I was walking home in the freezing cold because my family thought it was okay to leave me freezing in the car. I heard the sound of an engine behind me. Cole and Fernanda were following, apparently trying to talk me into coming back. The car moved slowly, keeping pace with my stride. The side window rolled down. Dad, get in the car, Cole yelled. Stop being stubborn. I kept walking without looking back. Rupert, you're acting like a child, Fernanda added. What's all the fuss about? Because of what? They really didn't understand why I left. To them, what happened was nothing, a misunderstanding, a joke. We didn't do it on purpose, Cole insisted. We just forgot. It happens. It happens. Forgetting your elderly father on a freezing night, it happens. Leaving him freezing in the car while you're having fun in the warmth, that happens. Laughing at his misery, that happens too. I turned onto a side street where the car couldn't follow me because of the narrow roadway. The sound of the engine stayed behind, then gradually faded. Apparently Cole and Fernanda had decided that I'd come to my senses and come home on my own. The drive home took an hour and 20 minutes. I walked at a leisurely pace, trying not to slip on the icy patches. The frost was invigorating, making my brain work clearly and distinctly. During this time, I had time to think about a lot of things. I realized that what happened today was not an accident or a misunderstanding. It was the natural result of 3 years of humiliation that I dutifully endured, hoping for the best. Cole and Fernanda had long ago stopped seeing me as a person. I'd become something like a pet to them, useful when it came to cooking or cleaning the house, and burdensome at all other times. Today they showed me their true attitude to me without embellishments. And they showed that they would do anything, even outright cruelty, to avoid recognizing me as their equal. It's good for an old man to toughen up. These words sounded in my head like a verdict, not a judgment on them, a judgment on our relationship. After tonight, I could no longer pretend we were a family. When I got to the house, the windows were dark. Cole and Fernanda weren't back yet, probably decided to stay at the party until the end. Or they were looking for me around town, though that was unlikely. I opened the door with my key and stepped into the hallway. The house greeted me with silence and coldness. The temperature had dropped noticeably during our absence. A forgotten turkey was cooling in the oven, untouched plates were on the table, and gifts that now seemed like a mockery lay under the tree. This was my home, the house that I had lived in for half a century, that I had built with my own hands, that I had filled with memories of a happy life with Dorothy. And in this house, I no longer wanted to see the people who thought it was okay to bully me. I turned on the light in the hallway and undressed, hanging my jacket, damp from the snow, on the hook by the door. My hands were shaking not from the cold, but from the tension that had built up over the evening. The house was quiet and cool, the thermostat reading 16 degrees. Fernanda was always economizing on the heating, claiming that high temperatures were unhealthy. Walked to the kitchen and opened the oven. The turkey looked sad, the skin was wrinkled, the meat dried out. 3 hours ago, it had been a festive dinner, prepared with love and hope for family night. Now the bird reminded me of how easily dreams turn into disappointments. I turned off the oven and left the turkey to cool. I didn't feel like eating the lump in my throat from the humiliation I'd suffered. Instead, I put the kettle on and pulled a jar of chamomile tea from the cupboard. Dorothy always made it when she needed to calm her nerves or just to sit in silence, thinking about important decisions. While the water boiled, I walked around the house, turning on the lights in the rooms. The living room with the Christmas tree and presents underneath, the bedroom where Cole and Fernanda slept, my office where the papers and family photos were kept. All of these spaces were saturated with memories, happy and bitter, distant and very recent. In the study, I paused in front of a photograph of Dorothy and me standing in front of an unfinished house. I was 28 at the time. My wife was 26. Young, full of plans, believing they would build a happy family within these walls. And we did. 30 years of our life together here were filled with joy, love, mutual support. Cole was born in this house. Or rather, he was born in the hospital, but we brought him home here in the nursery, which I furnished with my own hands. I painted the walls a soft blue color, assembled the crib, hung shelves for toys. Dorothy sat in a rocking chair and breastfed her son, and I looked at them and felt like the happiest man on earth. My son was growing up here, taking his first steps on this hardwood floor, saying his first words at this kitchen table. He learned to ride his bike in the yard, played soccer with the neighborhood kids, brought friends to birthday parties. As a teenager, he would lock himself in his room, listening to loud music, arguing with us about school and the future. Then Cole grew up, moved away, got married, divorced, and 3 years ago he'd returned, no longer as a son seeking support from loving parents, but as a stranger who'd agreed to a temporary cohabitation for practical reasons. The kettle whistled, bringing me back to the present. I brewed some chamomile and sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where our family had once had breakfast. The hot tea warmed me from the inside out, helped my thoughts take clearer shape. What had happened today wasn't just an unfortunate coincidence. It was a demonstration of how Cole and Fernanda saw my place in their lives. I was useful as a housekeeper, a cook, a bill payer, but as a person with my own needs and dignity, they were not interested in me. It's good for an old man to toughen up. That phrase never left my mind. It was the quintessence of their attitude toward me. For them, I am not Rupert Chandler, not a father, not a man with half a century of life experience. I'm just an old man whose body can be put to the test for dubious benefit. And the worst part is, they genuinely didn't understand why I took offense. To Cole and Fernanda, leaving me in a freezing car for a few hours was a minor misunderstanding, a cause for jokes. They couldn't imagine that I was capable of feeling pain, humiliation, despair. I finished my tea and looked at the clock. 11:30. Cole and Fernanda still hadn't returned. Perhaps they'd stayed at the party until the end, or perhaps they decided to spend the night somewhere else. Either way, I had a break, time to think and make a decision. And the decision had been maturing for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. Even before tonight, watching the way my son and daughter-in-law behaved in my house, I realized that it could not go on like this. But I had hoped that the situation would somehow change on its own, that Cole would remember the family ties, that Fernanda would learn to respect the man who gave them shelter. Now I realized that there would be no change. What's more, their attitude toward me would only get worse. Today they left me freezing in the car and laughed about it. Tomorrow they would find another way to show me where I belonged. And so it would go on as long as I put up with it. But I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. The house belonged to me. I'd bought it with my own money, put my own labor and soul into it, lived here the best years of my life, and I had every right to decide who could live here and who couldn't. Cole and Fernanda moved in as temporary residents. We never signed any official cohabitation papers, and they had no rights to the house. Legally, they were just guests who stayed longer than planned. And it was customary to ask guests who didn't know how to behave to leave the house. I rose from the desk and made my way to the study. The desk held all the important documents: the house title, the will, insurance policies, bank statements. I pulled out a folder of legal papers and looked through them, refreshing my memory of the formalities. The house was in my name only. Cole wasn't officially registered here, receiving mail at his old address. Fernanda hadn't changed her registration since the move either. From a formal point of view, they didn't live here, only visited. That made it easy. I didn't have to file for divorce or divide the property. It was enough to notify them that the guesting was over and ask them to vacate the premises within a reasonable time. But it was better to make it official, through paperwork. So there would be no misunderstandings, so that Cole and Fernanda couldn't say later that they hadn't understood the seriousness of my intentions. I looked out the window at the house across the street. Daryl Murphy, my neighbor for 20 years, lived there. The man worked as a clerk in a law firm, good with paperwork, helped me with insurance and tax returns a few times. A man reliable, discreet, not a fan of gossip. The windows in Daryl's house were lit up. The family hadn't gone to bed yet. Maybe they were celebrating Christmas too, albeit in a more modest circle. Murphy had a wife and 2 grown children who came over for the holidays, a normal family where parents were respected and loved. I threw on my jacket and went outside. The snow continued to fall, but not as thickly as before. The path to my neighbor's house had been shoveled. Daryl always kept the yard clean. I knocked on the door and waited. Daryl's wife Carol opened the door. The woman was surprised to see me at this hour. "Rupert, what are you doing here? Come in, it's freezing outside." "Thank you, Carol. I didn't want to disturb you on a holiday, but it's urgent. Is Daryl home?" "Ah, of course he is. He's in his office, going through some papers." "Daryl," she shouted into the back of the house, "Rupert's here to see you." Daryl appeared quickly, a tall, thin man in his 60s with a neat gray beard. His neighbor always dressed strictly. Even at home he wore a shirt and tie, a habit left over from his office days. "Rupert, good to see you." Daryl shook my hand firmly. "How are you? How's Christmas?" "That's why I'm here," I said. "Hoyer, can we talk privately?" Daryl nodded and led me into his office. The room was simple and functional. A desk, bookshelves, 2 leather armchairs. There were stacks of documents on the desk and a computer running. "Sit down, Rupert. What's wrong? You look worried." I sat down in the chair opposite and tried to formulate my request. "Daryl, I need legal advice. More specifically, I need some advice on some documents." "I'm listening." "I'd like to ask my son and his wife to vacate my house, officially by written notice, so that everything can be done legally without scandal or misunderstanding." Daryl raised his eyebrows but didn't ask any more questions. That was one of the reasons I'd approached him, a neighbor who knew how to keep a professional distance. "I see. What are their rights of occupancy? Is there a lease? A co-ownership agreement?" "There's no paperwork." Cole moved in after his mother died as a transient. The wife joined later. They're not officially registered here. "That makes it easy," Daryl nodded. "In that case, a written notice of termination would suffice. You have to give them a time limit within which they have to vacate the premises. How long would be reasonable?" 30 days for family members, but more if you want to be generous. 30 days. In a month, Cole and Fernanda can find a new place to live, pack their things, organize their lives without my involvement. That's a reasonable amount of time. 30 days will do," I said. "Good. When should the notice take effect?" I thought about it. Today is December 24th. If the notice is dated tomorrow, it will expire on January 24th. Symbolically, exactly 1 month after the Christmas that showed me the true face of my family. How about December 25th? That would be tomorrow. Daryl nodded and turned on his computer. "I'm going to draft the text now. It should be ready in half an hour. But Rupert, once the notice is served, there's no turning back." "Are you sure you're sure of your decision?" Was I sure? I thought of tonight, 2 hours in an icy car, laughing at my misery. I thought about 3 years of living as a servant in my own home. I thought of what the future held for me if nothing changed. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Absolutely sure." I woke up early, around 7 in the morning, though I'd gone to bed well past midnight the night before. Daryl had spent more time on the document than he'd planned, wanting it to be legally perfect. In the end, the notice was clear, formal, and left no room for ambiguity. Cole and Fernanda never returned home. Their bed remained untouched. Their car was not in the yard. Maybe they stayed the night at Lindsay's or some other friend's house. Or maybe they decided to show me their displeasure by spending the night somewhere else. Either way, their absence gave me time to think calmly about the upcoming conversation. I got up, showered, shaved, and dressed in my best suit, the dark blue one Dorothy had bought me for my silver wedding. I wanted to look dignified on the big day, the day I would take back control of my own life. I made myself breakfast, oatmeal with raisins, toast with honey, strong coffee. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. For 3 years, I'd been making breakfast for three, hurrying so Cole and Fernanda wouldn't be late for work. Today, I had time to enjoy my morning meal in silence. The winter sun peeked out the window, illuminating the snow-covered yard. Christmas morning was quiet and peaceful. Most people were relaxing at home, spending time with their families. I was spending time at home too, but as a single host preparing to welcome unwanted guests. The document lay on the kitchen table in a thick envelope. Daryl had suggested that I hand it over officially, in the presence of a witness, so that Cole and Fernanda couldn't say they hadn't received it. The neighbor even offered his services as a witness if needed. Around 10 in the morning, I heard the familiar sound of an engine. A dark blue sedan pulled into the yard and stopped by the porch. Cole and Fernanda got out of the car, looking tired but satisfied. Apparently, the party had been a success, and the night had been spent in pleasant company. They entered the house, talking loudly and laughing. Fernanda was saying something about dancing. Cole was commenting on the quality of Lindsay's alcohol. Both were in high spirits, people who had had a great holiday weekend. "Hey, Dad," shouted Cole as he walked past the kitchen. "How's it going? Didn't miss you." The tone was light, carefree, as if last night had been a normal family outing, not the humiliation I'd endured. "Merry Christmas," Fernanda added, peering into the kitchen. "Have you had breakfast yet? We want coffee, too." She spoke as if she expected me to get up and make them breakfast. The usual, like 3 years in a row. "Merry Christmas," I said neutrally. "Coffee in the turbo, help yourself." Fernanda was a little surprised at that answer, but she shrugged and headed for the stove. Cole had already disappeared into the bedroom, apparently to change clothes after last night's party. I sat at the table, envelope in hand, and watched my sister-in-law. Fernanda moved around the kitchen like a hostess opening cabinets, pulling out cups, turning on the stove. There was not a shadow of awkwardness in her demeanor, or an understanding that something wrong had happened yesterday. "That was a great party," she said, stirring the sugar in her cup. "Lindsay really knows how to host. And the people were interesting, especially that guy who works at the insurance company," Cole added, coming back into the kitchen in his house clothes. "Said he could get a discount on his policy." They were talking about the party as if I'd been there. Like I wasn't sitting in a locked car in the freezing cold for 2.5 hours. I was having fun with them. "Remember when Brand told that joke about the pensioner?" Fernanda laughed. "I almost choked on my coffee." "Yeah, it was funny," Cole agreed, especially the ending about the nursing home. The retirement home joke. I wonder what that was about. Was it about how funny old people look when they're cold? Or about how ungrateful they are when they complain about being mistreated? "Ah, by the way, Dad," Cole turned to me. "I'm sorry about yesterday. We really forgot we locked you in the car." "Yeah, I'm sorry, Rupert," Fernanda said. "We didn't realize you wouldn't be able to get out." The apology sounded formal, without much sympathy, as if they were apologizing for stepping on my foot on the bus, not for leaving me out in the cold for hours. "It's no big deal," I said. "It's all long forgotten." No, that's great." Cole was happy. "So no hard feelings." I was beginning to think you were really mad. I was seriously pissed. For him, last night had been just a mild annoyance, nothing more. Something that's silly to mess up a relationship over. "Osh, what have you got there?" Fernanda asked, noticing the envelope in my hands. "Sha, a Christmas card from some old friends," I lied. "They wish me a happy holiday." "Oh, I see. By the way, where are our presents?" Fernanda looked around. "I think there was something under the tree yesterday." "It's still there," I confirmed. "It hasn't gone anywhere." "Then let's go unpack." Cole rubbed his hands together. "I love this moment. It's like when I was a kid." They headed into the living room where the Christmas tree stood. I got up and followed them, still holding the envelope. It was the time I had been waiting for all night. There were indeed presents under the Christmas tree. 2 small wrappers I had prepared for Cole and Fernanda. Work boots for my son and a scarf for my daughter-in-law. Modest but practical items. "Only 2 gifts?" Fernanda was surprised. "Where's yours?" "My gift is special," I said. "You'll get it later." Cole picked up the bundle of shoes, twirled it around in his hands. It's heavy. What's in it? Unpack it and see. His son tore open the package and pulled out his new work boots. Sturdy, good leather, with non-slip soles. Just the kind he'd been asking for months. Oh, great, Cole was pleased. Just what he needed. Thanks, Dad. Fernanda unwrapped her gift, a soft burgundy wool scarf. It was good quality, too, though it had been bought at a discount. It's beautiful, she said discreetly. Thank you. There was no joy in her tone. I guess my daughter-in-law was expecting something more expensive or interesting, but I tried to choose gifts that were practical, not showy. And now my present, I said, holding out the envelope to Cole. My son took the envelope in surprise, twirling it in his hands. What is it, money? Open it and you'll see. Cole opened the envelope and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it, ran his eyes over the text. His expression gradually changed from curiosity to bewilderment to shock. What is this? He asked quietly. An official notice, so I answered calmly. Termination of your right to reside in my house. Fernanda snatched the paper from her husband's hands and began to read aloud. I hereby notify you that as of December 25th, 2024, your right to reside in the house at the address of... She stopped and looked at me. Rupert, what is this nonsense? It's not nonsense, I said. It's an official document, and it's all in order. You have 30 days to find a new place to live and vacate my house. Cole silently reread the document as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Fernanda stood with her mouth open, still not realizing the seriousness of the situation. Dad, are you serious? Finally asked her son. Absolutely serious. But why? Because of yesterday, we apologized. It wasn't just yesterday. Because of the 3 years that showed me we couldn't live together. Fernanda finally woke up from her shock. Rupert, you can't kick us out. This is our house too. No, I objected. It's my house, only mine. I bought it, I pay for it, it's in my name. And you're a guest here, staying longer than planned. But we're family, Cole exclaimed. Family. I looked at my son carefully. After last night, I realized we hadn't been family for a long time. Families don't do that to each other. Cole and Fernanda stood in the living room, holding a document in their hands, and were silent. The winter sun was shining outside the window, the Christmas tree was twinkling with garlands, and the holiday wrapping from their presents was lying under the branches. A typical Christmas scene, except for the fact that I had just handed them an eviction notice. Dad, let's sit down and have a quiet conversation, Cole said finally, sinking into the chair. Maybe we misunderstood something. You got it right, I replied, standing. 30 days to find a new place to live. That's more than reasonable. Fernanda reread the document, as if hoping to find a trick or a mistake in it. It's illegal, she exclaimed. You can't just throw people out on the street. You can if they don't have legal rights of occupancy, I argued, and you have no such rights. We didn't sign any contracts. You're not officially registered here. But we're relatives, Cole jumped up from his chair. I'm your son. That's why I'm giving you a month instead of the legal 3 days. Fernanda threw the document on the coffee table. Rupert, enough theater. We understand that you're upset about yesterday, but that's no reason to make such a spectacle of yourself. It's not an act, I said calmly. Just a decision that was long overdue. Wow, what decision? Cole came closer to me. About what, Dad? Explain it properly, not with these papers. I looked at my son. He was a tall, sturdy man of 46 who still didn't realize what he'd done. There was genuine bewilderment in his eyes. He really couldn't understand why I had made this decision. Do you want an explanation? I said. Please. 3 years ago, you asked to stay with me temporarily until you got back on your feet after the divorce. I said yes because you're my son. Yeah, so? So the temporary became permanent. You brought your wife here, made yourself at home here, and forgot this was my home. Fernanda snorted. Forgot? We pay the utilities. You do? I laughed. Fernanda, you pay 1/3 of the amount. I pay the rest. But we help around the house, Cole objected. Do you? I shook my head. Cole, when was the last time you cooked dinner? Or did the laundry? Or cleaned the house? My son faltered, obviously trying to remember. Well, I work. I'm tired. Shannon. And I'm not tired. I'm 74 years old, but I cook, clean, wash, iron, and you come home and expect me to feed you and serve you. Sure, anyway, you're retired, Fernanda intervened. You have more time. Retired doesn't mean free servant, I said. I have my own things to do, my own needs. Cole sat back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. Okay, let's say we really didn't help much around the house. That can be fixed. We'll start getting more involved. Will you? I looked at my son questioningly. Like yesterday. What was yesterday about yesterday? Fernanda exploded. So what if we sat in the cold for a while? It's good for your health. This phrase brought me back to the state I had experienced the day before, sitting in the icy car. Rage, humiliation, despair, all at once. Is it good for your health? I repeated quietly. Sitting for 2.5 hours in a locked car in 10-degree frost? Well, maybe not 2.5, Cole started. It was 2.5, I interrupted him. From 7:30 to 9:45. I looked at my watch every 5 minutes. Dad, it's not like we did it on purpose. Not on purpose? I took a step toward my son. Cole, you locked the car knowing I was inside. Then you had 2.5 hours of fun in a warm house, and when I finally got your attention, you laughed at me. We weren't laughing at you, Fernanda objected. We were only joking. It's good for an old man to toughen up, I quoted her words. Was that a joke? My sister-in-law blushed, realizing she had gone too far. Oh, well, maybe it was an unfortunate joke. So, unfortunate? I shook my head. Fernanda, you were making fun of a 74-year-old man who was freezing in his car while you were having fun. That's not a lame joke. That's cruelty. Stop dramatizing it, Cole shrieked. You were in a car, not a concentration camp. What's the difference? I asked. I was locked against my will in a cold room and left to suffer for my own pleasure. What are you talking about? Fernanda got up from the sofa. What pleasure? We just forgot. Forgotten? I laughed bitterly. In 2.5 hours, not once did you think of me? Not once did you think about how the man who stayed in the car was doing? We thought you'd gone home, Cole muttered. How could I leave a locked car? Teleport? His son fell silent, realizing the absurdity of his words. Look, Dad, he finally said, let's forget about yesterday. We are guilty, we admit it. But because of one mistake to ruin the whole family? One mistake? I shook my head. Cole, it's not one mistake. It's the result of 3 years of you treating me like a servant. Not like a servant, Fernanda countered. It's just that, well, we're used to you doing everything yourself. We're used to it. I repeated the word, feeling it cut my ears. You're used to me serving you. I'm used to being disrespected. We respect you, Cole exclaimed. You do? I looked at my son carefully. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Or asked me what I wanted for dinner? Or suggested we spend the evening together? Cole was silent, clearly trying to remember. We live together. We talk every day. Talk? I chuckled. Cole, our communication boils down to you asking me to cook a meal or wash shirts. That's not communicating. That's giving orders. What, you can't ask a relative for help now? Fernanda intervened. You can ask, but you can't demand it, and you can't take help for granted. We didn't demand. We didn't. I interrupted her. Fernanda, when was the last time you thanked me for dinner or for doing your laundry? My sister-in-law thought for a moment, trying to remember. Well, we understand that you're trying. You know, I nodded. But you don't think it's necessary to show this understanding in words or deeds? Dad, come on! Cole jumped out of his chair. You're picking on little things. Little things? I looked at my son in surprise. Cole, respecting people is not a small thing. Gratitude is not a small thing. Paying attention to loved ones is not a small thing. But we're not enemies, Fernanda exclaimed. We're just used to a certain way of life. I'm not used to being invisible in my own house. How are you invisible? And Cole objected. We talk. We discuss things. Seen in our talking? I laughed. Cole, can you name one thing we've talked about in the last month, other than the mundane? The son thought for a moment, obviously trying to remember something. Well, we talked about the weather. The weather, I nodded. A profound topic for a father and son to talk about. Sweet, what else is there to talk about? Fernanda shrugged. We have different interests. Different interests. I repeated her words. Do you know what my interests are? Cole and Fernanda looked at each other, clearly unprepared for such a question. Well, you like to cook, the son said uncertainly. What else? Watching the news? What else? Treaty, going to the store. I listened to this sad list and realized that to them, I was really just a function. Cook, cleaner, grocery shopper. They hadn't seen me as a person for a long time. Did you know, I said quietly, that I played chess for 20 years at the Veterans Club? That I read history books? That I collect old coins? That I wrote poetry to my mother before my mother's war? Cole and Fernanda were silent, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Did you know that every Sunday I go to the cemetery to visit my mother? That my knees hurt from an old injury? That I miss my work and my comrades? Dad, Cole started. Did you know that I dream of going to California, where your mother and I spent our honeymoon? That I want to learn how to use a computer? That I think about the meaning of life and I'm afraid of being alone? We didn't know, Fernanda said quietly. Schönekernom, we didn't know. I nodded. Because you've never been interested. To you, I'm not a person with feelings, thoughts, dreams. I'm just a convenient mechanism to serve your needs. That's not true, Cole exclaimed. We didn't think, we didn't. I repeated what he said. 3 years of not thinking about the fact that I had my own life, my own desires. All right, Fernanda said conciliatingly. Now we'll think. We'll talk more. Take an interest in your affairs. Will you? I looked at her skeptically. Like yesterday. Yesterday was an accident. Accident? I shook my head. Fernanda, yesterday you showed your true colors. When it suited you, you forgot about me. And when I complained, you laughed at me. We won't do it again, Cole promised. You won't? I grinned. What's changed since yesterday? What would make you act differently? We realized our mistakes. Realized, I interrupted my son. Cole, 5 minutes ago you thought I was being dramatic over nothing. My son was silent, realizing I was right. Dad, he finally said, give us another chance. We'll really change. Another chance? I laughed bitterly. Cole, I've been giving you chances for 3 years. Every day I kept quiet about your antics. Every time I forgave disrespect. Sure you wait, but it's gonna be different now. No, I said firmly. Nothing will be different now, because I no longer want to live with people who don't respect me. Fernanda got up from the sofa and came over to me. Rupert, you can't just throw us out. We don't have money for a new place to live. There's a month to find it. Ah, a month is nothing. Apartments are expensive. You need a deposit. Then look for something cheaper, or ask your friends for help. What friends? Cole exclaimed. Lindsay? She wouldn't even let you come to the party. That's your problem, I said calmly. Not mine. But we're family, Fernanda shouted in frustration. I looked at them, the man who called himself my son but didn't know about my interests and dreams, and the woman who thought it was okay to laugh at my suffering. These people had lived in my house for 3 years but had never become close to me. No, I said quietly. We are not a family. Family is when people care about each other, respect each other, take an interest in each other's lives, and we don't have that and never have. There was a heavy silence in the living room after I said that. Cole sat in his chair staring at the floor, Fernanda standing by the tree, clutching the scarf she'd given him. Snow was falling outside the window, creating a deceptive sense of coziness and peace, but the atmosphere in the house was far from Christmas harmony. You can't be serious, Cole finally said, raising his head. Kicking your own son out on the street on Christmas Day. I'm not kicking him out, I said calmly. I'm giving you a month to find a new place to live. That's more than enough time for independent adults. A month in the middle of winter, Fernanda exclaimed. And when everything is expensive, when employers won't hire. Employers? I was surprised. You're already working. I work part-time, my sister-in-law reminded me. Cole gets pennies. It's not enough money for a rented apartment. Us then get a part-time job. Or move to another neighborhood where it's cheaper. Fernanda gave me a look of fury. You want us to live in the slums? I want you to live apart from me. Where you live is up to you. Cole got up from his chair and paced the room, rubbing his hair nervously. Dad, think with your head. We've lived together for so many years. We have common memories, common life. Shared memories? I looked at my son with interest. What kind of memories? Well, like, eating dinner together, watching TV. Cole, in 3 years, we've never watched TV together. You turn on your shows, I go in the other room. What about dinners? At dinner, you read the news on your phone. Fernanda complains about work. What's there to talk about? My son paused as if only now realizing the truth of my words. But we can change that. We can be a real family. Cole, I said tiredly, in 74 years of life, I've learned one simple truth. People don't change. They may pretend to be different for a while, but they're still the same. That's not true, Fernanda came closer. People are capable of reforming themselves. They can, I nodded, but only if they really want to. And you don't. You want me to take back what I said and go back to the way things were. What's wrong with that? My sister-in-law asked. We lived a normal life. You lived normally. I lived like a servant. Stop saying servants, Cole exploded. Nobody took you for a servant. No? I grinned. Who made your breakfast every morning? Who did your laundry? Who did your dishes? You did it all yourself. So, because if I didn't, you'd be hungry and dirty. Shh, we'd do it ourselves. Sure, we would, I laughed. Cole, when was the last time you cooked your own food? Not heat it up, but cook it? His son hesitated, clearly not remembering. When I was young. And when I was young. Now you're a grown man who doesn't know how to fry an egg. Yes, I do. Cole took offense. Then why don't you ever cook? Because. Well, you're better at it. I know how to cook because I practice every day. And you can't because other people do it for you. Fernanda sat down on the sofa and wrapped her arms around her head. Rupert, why are you picking on us? We're not saints, but we're not monsters either. We're ordinary people. Ordinary people don't laugh at the suffering of their loved ones. Shelburne, we didn't laugh at the suffering, she shrieked. It was just a bad joke. A joke is when it's funny to everyone. And when it's funny only to those who are being mocked, it's called mockery. Now ikanana, bullying? Cole stopped in front of me. Dad, do you really think we were making fun of you? What do you call it? I asked. Locking an elderly man in a cold car and laughing at his pleas? No one laughed at the pleas. No. I looked at my son carefully. What were they laughing at then when they said, it's good for an old man to toughen up? Cole fell silent, realizing he'd backed himself into a corner. We were just trying to lighten the mood. Shuri, lighten the mood? I shook my head. Cole, the situation was tense because you did the wrong thing. And instead of apologizing, you decided to make a fool out of me. All right, Fernanda exclaimed. Let's say we did wrong, but because of one mistake, to break up a family? One mistake? I looked at her in surprise. Fernanda, it's not one mistake, it's the quintessence of your attitude towards me. What quintessence? Keep it simple. Simpler? I sat in the chair across from you. Okay. 3 years ago, when Cole asked to stay with me, I thought I was helping my son through a difficult time, that it was just temporary until he got his life together. It was, Cole nodded. It was, but gradually the temporary became permanent. You brought Fernanda here, you made yourself at home, and you forgot that I was the boss. We didn't forget. Your son, we did. I raised my hand, stopping the objections. At first I cooked sometimes when you didn't have time. Then I cooked every day because you didn't want to. Then I started cleaning because you wouldn't clean. Then I did the laundry because you wouldn't do it. You suggested it. I did? I laughed. Cole, I didn't suggest it. I was just doing what had to be done, and you took it for granted. We thanked you. Now, when? I took a good look at my son. Name one time you ever thanked me for dinner. Cole was silent, obviously trying to remember something. You can't? I nodded, because gratitude implied an acknowledgement that you'd been done a favor. and you saw my chores as a favor. Isn't that normal? Fernanda asked. In families, everyone has a role to play. My role? I looked at my daughter-in-law carefully. What was my role? Well, you're retired, more time at home. What was your role? Fernanda thought for a moment. We work, we earn money. Work? I grinned. Fernanda, you work 4 hours a day. Cole 8, and I work from morning till night. Cooking, cleaning, washing, ironing, shopping. But it's not that hard work. It's not? I got up from my chair. Try living for a week doing everything yourself. See if you find it easy. We didn't ask you to do all this, Cole exclaimed. You didn't? I turned to my son. Who said, Dad, make breakfast every morning? Who declared in the evening, I'm tired, I'm not going to cook? Well, it's natural. Natural for whom? For you, yes, not for me. Cole and Fernanda looked at each other, confusion in their eyes. It was the first time they had ever been in a situation where their behavior was being harshly criticized. Dad, the son finally said, okay, we were wrong, but people learn from mistakes. Give us a chance to improve. But make amends on that, I'm thinking. What exactly do you want to fix? Under more help around the house, more socializing. More help? I chuckled. Cole, that's not helping. That's your responsibility. A grown man should be cleaning up after himself, cooking his own food. Fine, I'll do my own thing. What about socializing, which I asked. What will change in our relationship? The son thought for a moment, obviously not knowing what to answer. Well, we'll talk more. About what? Oh, things. Different things. I nodded. Cole, in 3 years, we've never found a common topic of conversation. What's going to change now? Submarine. We will, Fernanda said with conviction. We'll be interested in what you're doing. Sunum, my affairs. I looked at my daughter-in-law with curiosity. What exactly are you interested in? Well, your hobbies. What kind of hobbies? Name one. Fernanda was embarrassed, realizing she'd been caught. We'll find out about your hobbies. You will. I nodded. Out of politeness. And then you'll forget because you're not interested in them. We won't. Fernanda, I said tiredly, you don't even know my full name. What do you mean I don't know? Rupert. What's your middle name? The daughter-in-law hesitated, obviously not remembering. Well, Rupert. Autry, Rupert Charles Chandler, I prompted. But you never cared about that. Never mind the middle name. Fernanda waved her hand. What difference does it make? The difference is, I said quietly, that you don't know even the basic facts about me. How can you claim to be interested in my life? There was silence in the room again. Cole and Fernanda stood before me like delinquent school children caught cheating. All right, the son said. Let's say we don't know much about you, but it can be remedied. It can, I agreed. If you want to, and you don't. I do. No, Cole. You have a desire to stay in my house, but you have no interest in me as a person and never have. Fernanda suddenly cried, quietly, hopelessly. Rupert, what are you doing? We're not enemies. Why destroy what we have? What is I asked. A simulated family, a kinship game. We're real relatives. Blood relatives, I agreed, but not in spirit. Cole came over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Dad, I understand that we weren't perfect neighbors. Neighbors? I looked at my son, surprised. Well, I mean, roommates. Cole, I said quietly, you can't even call us a family right now. That says a lot. My son pulled his hand away, realizing the awkwardness of the situation. Okay, family, we weren't a perfect family, but who's perfect? No one is perfect, I agreed. But there are basic things, respect, attention, caring. We didn't have that. We did, Fernanda exclaimed. We cared about you. How? The daughter-in-law hesitated, obviously trying to remember examples of her care. Oh, no, we asked how you were doing. When Narnim? Well, sometimes. Fernanda, I said sadly, in 3 years, you've never once asked me how I was doing. Not once. No way! Yes, I have, because you weren't interested. The woman was silent, realizing the truth of my words. It took a few days for Cole and Fernanda to realize that I was really serious about my intentions. First, they tried to talk me down, then they threatened to sue me, then they apologized again. But I remained adamant. On December 27th, they began to pack their things. Silently, with hurt faces, they put their clothes into suitcases and boxes. Fernanda cried. Cole was angry, but they both realized they had no choice. "Oh, where will you move to?" I asked as I watched them pack. "To Fernanda's friend's house," Cole mumbled. "Temporarily." "I see." "Are you happy?" my sister-in-law asked, wiping away her tears. "No," I answered honestly, "but it's necessary." They finished packing by the evening of December 30th. The car was crammed to the brim with stuff, with suitcases barely fitting in the back seat. "Well," Cole said, standing in the hallway with the keys in his hand, "I guess this is the end." "What? The end of one phase?" I corrected him. "Maybe the beginning of another." "What other stage?" "The stage where you learn to be independent." The son grinned bitterly. "At 46, learning to be independent. A little late, don't you think?" "It's never too late if you have the desire." Fernanda was silent, standing beside her husband. Her face was stony, her eyes red with tears. "Goodbye, Dad," Cole said, handing me the keys to the house. "Goodbye, Tarakonendo. Woman." They walked out without turning around. The car started, rolled down the driveway, turned down the street, and disappeared into the winter twilight. I was alone in a house that was once again mine alone. Silence surrounded me on all sides, but this time it was not oppressive, but liberating. I walked through the rooms, turning on the lights, returning the house to its former appearance. I removed unnecessary things that reminded me of the presence of strangers, arranged the furniture the way I liked it. By the new year, the house was my home again, a place where I could live by my own rules, eat what I wanted, watch the shows that interested me, read books in silence. The loneliness I was so afraid of turned out not to be scary. On the contrary, it was honest. It is better to be alone than in the company of people who do not respect you. On December 31st, I cooked myself a modest dinner, opened a bottle of good wine, and welcomed the new year in an armchair by the fireplace, reading a travel book. Snow was falling outside the window. The house was warm and quiet, and my heart was at peace. I was home, at last, truly home,